All right, we are
You can
recording.
still see my hair, right? Even though I'm cut off.
I can see your hair. When you
So
push up a little bit, it starts to cut off a little bit, but yeah, like that. It just like a little bit, like a little
I
bit.
know, but
But
my little thing is like right on my left hand side. My little showing me, and it's cut off. But whatever, that's fine.
so I guess this is it.
This is it.
This is the Sunshine Reformer podcast.
It is, and I like that name. Did
It's
you
much
start?
better than what we had before.
Did you start recording?
Yeah, I just started recording.
Oh, great.
This is it. This is it.
This is it.
Um. So what are you drinking?
Okay, so today I'm drinking. I'm going to try to keep it Florida.
Okay.
So this is called Cloud Chaser. I
All
don't know if you
right.
can see that. And it is a Hefeweizen.
I
Pronounce
don't.
that right.
I don't know what that is.
It's German.
Ah. Okay.
It means wheat beer,
Okay.
and it is made right here in sunny Orlando by the what are they called? Crooked Can Brewery. 5.3% alcohol, and it is delightful.
Nice little sipper there.
Yeah,
Is
nice
it
little.
hoppy by chance?
It's not. It's weedy, so it's kind of malty. The typical notes of and we're turning to a beer podcast real quick. Um,
Well, this is very important.
yeah, it's banana, clove, that sort of vein. Think of like a saison or like a farmhouse ale. It's that sort of situation on that spectrum.
Nice.
Yeah, it's
When
good.
when I drink beer from a can, it's usually Yingling because it's really cheap when you buy a 24 pack.
It is.
But when I'm at a
Yep.
bar, I do prefer my stouts. I wish I had written it down or remembered it or something, but we went to Tampa, I want to say like a year ago or something, and they had like a locally brewed stout. And usually, like, if you see a locally brewed stout, first of all, they don't normally exist. And then secondly, they're usually really bad. From my experience,
Mm,
at least,
really.
I've never had like a really good, like
We need
locally
to
brewed stout.
we need to
Um,
have you. I'm okay. This is not the podcast at all. But I've got hops tattooed on my arm, so I know a little bit about beer. Uh,
a little bit.
we need to get you some actual good beers because when you say that there's no good stouts, I
Well, not to say there's no
and
good ones, but when I've gone
well
I've been
specifically
to like
Tampa. Tampa's home to a lot of really good
That's
breweries.
what I was gonna say. Like I had one of the locally brewed stouts, and this is why I wish I had remembered it because I'd probably be ordering it somewhat
Yeah,
occasionally. It was a very good stout. It was like I can't explain it aside from it just tasted like dark chocolate and cherries. It was just so good, so
oh,
warm.
so it was good.
Oh, it was delicious. It was the only one. Like I've had stouts up in Jacksonville. I've had stouts in St. Augustine, stouts in Atlanta, and like the local ones are just like, yeah, let me try it. I like stouts. I tend to like them, and
Yeah.
usually they just don't turn out too well, or they
We'll
tend
have
to be not smooth like what you'd
let's
expect from a stout.
let's do a next time I'm in Palatka or you're in Orlando. We'll do a special live edition with just beer and just kind of have that like it be a special edition episode.
What's the big like board, where they bring out like a plank thing and they got like little beer shots that you can try
It's
like
just
a bunch
a
of beers.
flight.
Yeah,
That's
flight.
what it's
That's what it
called.
is. We will do like a flight of stouts or something.
Yeah, they've got all. I mean, Tampa specifically, they've got a lot. They've got way more breweries than Orlando, but Orlando's got quite a few that are good, and I know St. Augustine also does.
St. Augustine has a
So,
lot of different things. We have the distillery, of course,
of course,
and
yeah,
I will say, the gin from the St. Augustine distillery is probably the best gin I've ever had. Um, I'm not a gin person. I really don't like it. It tastes like pine sol to me a little bit. There you go. There it is. It is so good, dude.
I
It's
know it's
so
good.
good. Oh man, it's great. I
I've
recommend
got
it.
I've got I've got just a little tiny bit of the bourbon left.
Is that the
Don't
double
say no.
cask?
No, it's just the regular Florida straight bourbon. Well,
Yeah.
we used to have a bottle of the reserve stuff. Yeah, man. I like to drink a little bit. So
Well, my wife and I, we were both bartenders at different times. I was a bartender at an assisted living facility. So I had a lot of,
what?
I learned a lot about wines. I learned a lot
You
about
were hang on, back up. You were a
a
bar
bartender at a
tender.
at an assisted living facility. Yes,
Wait, an assisted living facility had a bar?
yes. So what they did is that they catered to like the upper middle class of people, like older people who
Mm-hmm.
were retiring. These are people who had about $2 million in like just spare, do what you want with your life kind of money on top of their like base. This is what I need to live money.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a few ways that you can go into this, and this is not like financial advice or anything, obviously, but like generally speaking, somewhere between 3 and 5% withdrawal rate is what you want to aim for if you want to like live comfortably. Like whatever that 3 to 5% is, that's what you want to get. So like if $80,000 is like your 5% withdrawal rate from like your collective savings account plus
Mm-hmm.
stocks plus other equities and all that. If you're withdrawing about 5%, let's say that's $80,000, whatever that is. I don't have a calculator or anything in front of me. I'm not doing the math real quick, but that's where you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like supposed to be like comfortable. That way, if you hit like hard times or there's like there's a stock market crash, you're not going to be heavily impacted by those
Right.
things. It's considered to be like safe.
Right.
Again, not financial advice. So that they would have that plus like $2 or $3 million, like to do whatever they want. Buy
So
Teslas
they were
every
fine.
year. Go
Yeah.
golfing like every single day as long as it wasn't raining, or if it was, it was like whatever. Um, but I learned a lot about wine. I learned a lot um,
That's what my dad's into is wine.
about like liquor, generally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
Where my wife worked at a proper bar. So she actually like mixed a bunch of shit. I never really mixed a lot of stuff. I just learned I learned, I guess, like the more finesse type of things when it comes to that kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuff. Not a lot of beer drinkers. It was either liquor or wine, but it was really
Yeah.
not a lot of beer.
Beer's a
Um,
young man's game.
yeah, it is. It tends to be cheaper and a bunch of other
Yeah.
stuff, and it doesn't hit as
Although
hard. You can have more.
I I actually so my dad's a wine guy. My dad worked at a restaurant in Melbourne for the last 6 or 7 years, called the Mansion. And the mansion was an actual mansion that was built in like the early 1900s that they turned into a restaurant, and so it was half restaurant, half retail,
Mm-hmm.
like a liquor store, but like fancy. And he was the beverage manager, so he was the one buying, all of these fancy scotches and whiskeys and rums and all that kind of stuff, beer also. And but my dad, he's a wine guy. He grew up. I grew up with my parents both drinking wine with every meal, pretty much. Um, you would think that I would have rubbed off on that, but again, being pretty poor as a youth in my 20s,
Mm-hmm.
I just gravitated towards beer. And really, when I turned 21, that's kind of when this whole craft beer thing really started to take off. It was around, before that a little bit, but it really started to like skyrocket in popularity. IPAs and wheat beers and stouts and all that kind of stuff. That's where all that kind of stuff, or when that stuff started happening, and the brewery explosion kind of happened. And so I grew up in Detroit, uh, Michigan, which currently I believe is fourth in the country. It used to be third in the country as far as number of breweries. California being number one and Colorado being number two. And so we were surrounded by a lot of really great breweries in Michigan. And I always kind of make fun of my dad. And I say, Dad, when I drink a beer, whatever it is, you could blindfold me and, put 5 or 6 of them in front of me, different styles, and I can tell you what every single one is. I couldn't even come close to doing that with wine.
Yeah,
And I
I
think
can't do that with wine either.
I, I'm not trying to knock wine drinking. If that's your thing and you like my wife will drink wine occasionally. She's got a really good girlfriend that is really into wine and knows all the different nuances and the different grapes and all that kind of stuff, vintages, if you will. But just to me, like it just tastes like grape juice, like that's just what it is. And I think beer is just every beer style is distinct. You know what I mean? Like
It hits you.
there's
It
different.
slaps you in the face. It's
Yeah,
different.
there's
Everything's
different.
different.
There's different. Every beer style has its own grain and distinct ingredient set. Wine is just grapes and a little bit of yeast or whatever. I know the grapes are different. The different wine regions produce different stuff, but I just think I like the variety more so. And I can. That's the other thing too is I know there's a brewery in Michigan called Bell's Brewery,
Hmm.
and they're the biggest brewery in Michigan, and they make an IPA called Two Hearted Ale. Now, if you put Two Hearted Ale next to Cigar City, what's there? Amber, what's Cigar City's IPA? Highlight. If you put those two together, along with another one, I could probably tell those apart also, because even within the style, there's different variances that make it unique. So
Now, I could never tell the difference between one IPA and another unless it was
yeah,
like starkly different. Like one was supposed to be very citrusy, whereas the other one's supposed to be like, I don't know, like some sort of darker or muted tone or whatever. I like unless it was drastically different. I honestly
right.
can't tell the difference between IPAs and that's another thing. I can't really do IPAs too much. Wheat beers, red beers, I'm pretty fine with, but
Yeah,
IPAs, I don't have the acquired taste for that.
yeah. I drank IPAs really for about 15 years, up until very recently. And I'm 35. My stomach is not what it used to be, and so I can't do them anymore either. I had to completely stop. I can do wheat beer, I can do lagers, and really just kind of the lighter side of things, um, and that's perfectly fine. I'm okay with that. So yeah, we gotta do a special beer episode or just drinking episode
Maybe
if you like.
I wouldn't necessarily mind it because
Mhm.
it's a whole culture. I mean, and humans have been doing it
Yeah,
for thousands of years.
I'm sure
Uh,
there's plenty of beer podcasts out there that
yeah,
that
that
talk
go
about it.
way more in depth than we will probably ever go in depth.
Exactly.
Um,
You want to go with some introductions and some biographies and talk about yourself for a little while?
yeah, I guess so.
Talk
So I'm fairly young.
about why we're actually here.
Yeah, I'm fairly young, and I don't know. I guess I got my leftist journey going. Um, I don't know, sometime like late high school, early college, kind of. I don't have like a completed degree. I ended up dropping. I went to school for music.
Hmm.
I dropped out of that. Could not keep up with what was required. And if you look online or you like listen to like what other people's experiences are who also dropped out of music, it tends to be very similar. They're working like a full-time
Yeah.
job already or near a full-time job on top of music school, which isn't typical. It's not like you just get like it's not like the same accreditation process necessarily. A lot of times, especially schools that aren't built for it or they don't build themselves around the music department, they kind of have to throw in like these extra classes at like half a credit hour or like a credit hour or something like that, or even 0 credit hours.
Hmm.
I had a couple like that too because there's just so much you have to do. Every single Friday there was a performance thing. Everybody was practicing throughout either the
So
year or
that
that semester.
was this a specific music school that you went to?
I went to FSCJ, which is in Jacksonville. Um,
Okay.
they have a pretty decent music department, but again, it's not something that's like they don't have like a really built. They don't build it around the music necessarily.
Right.
Whereas like UF has a very well developed music program, and some of the school is built around music. And now, I mean,
Right.
obviously they build it around football too, but when we're talking about educational departments, they actually build themselves around the music department a little bit. It's really good. Same thing
Yeah.
with FSU or Miami.
Right.
You'll
Right.
consistently find like those three schools nationally ranked fairly decently when it comes to like public music education or some sort of music degree in general. But
Right.
it's just like you're doing like you're officially getting like 15 credit hours, but you're doing in at school you're doing like 30 40 hours like hours worth of work at school, and then you have to go home and practice on top of it, and it's just like I was working like 38 39 hours because I wasn't full time, but I was
Right.
sure as hell was working close enough to full time or even did overtime a few times. And I just like, and then the drive 7 o'clock in the morning from St. Augustine to Jacksonville. It's like the worst time because it's rush hour, you know.
Right.
And then doing the same thing going back at sometime between 3 and 4 Monday through Friday, and then I worked at night until like 11.
Yeah.
And I was just
Sounds pretty heavy.
I'm like, I know there's people who are like they the bootstrap meme, you got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and just get like do it, and it's just like that's like 80 hours a week between those two
Right.
things. That's exhausting.
Yeah.
And that's not even like there's really no room for like just relaxing um
Right.
at all.
Self care
So,
is.
and that wasn't even like really including a lot of my other classes I needed to take. Like I
Hmm.
needed to take, my core stuff like English and math and all that. Like that, I wasn't even taking some of that stuff yet. So it was insane. Oy.
I get it.
But that's when I kind of like became a leftist. Somehow in there, in the midst of all that, I was able
Was there
to.
something specific, like a specific event or a collection of events that
I don't
happened?
know. It just kind of happened. It just kind of happened over the course of time. I was doing a lot of other
Well,
like.
didn't you say your religious beliefs kind of led you there too, or I should say lack thereof?
Yeah, it all kind of happened at the same time. I started losing my faith, and then at the same time, like, kind of because of that, because I was a little bit libertarian. Like, I considered myself socially left, but economically right. You know,
How old are
Eh,
you again?
I'm 24 currently.
Okay.
So back then, like before all this changed, I would be like, like, oh yeah, black people like they're a thing. We should probably respect that. We should
Right.
probably respect black people. We should probably respect like like trans people and gay people. We should probably like they should have rights. I think because they're still
Yeah,
people.
because they're
They
Americans,
they
just like
still
everybody else.
exist.
Yeah.
As far as I can tell, their mental capabilities are just as good or better than mine. You know,
Yeah.
and that seems to be the only thing that we
It's a
as
wild
humans like
concept, right?
keep. That's the only thing that we as humans like in the end we seem to like differentiate ourselves. Like if you were to ask anybody, well, what's the difference between us and like any other animal? It's like, well, it seems like intellectually we seem to be like on a different level compared to most, and then like these people are still people, they still like think like me, and they and some are smarter than me. Most
Would
probably
you
are.
would you
So
say that the community that you grew up in, was it diverse at all?
um probably I'd probably say yeah, to an extent. I mean, like, I grew up
What
in
city did you grow up in?
a lot. I moved around a lot, so that probably helped
Oh, okay.
too, but I moved around in a lot of the like lower middle class, I think, was probably most of where we lived
Yeah.
up until right up where the economic bubble of 2008 kind of hit.
Angus.
That kind of changed things too
Angus,
for
come here.
everybody.
Sorry, my dog's
It's okay.
see some stuff.
Um, so it's just It was about that. It was about the time though that I was like starting to question things like, um, well, hang on a second. This God thing doesn't exactly make sense. And I'd
Yeah,
watch like debates.
that's a whole podcast right there.
That yeah, that's a whole podcast right there. I'd watch things with like Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris and such debating people, and then internet debates on top of that with like just like these smaller, less well-known individuals. And then
Yeah.
that same skepticism kind of carried over into like economic policies, which if we're talking like left, it tends to be surrounded by more so economic policies, um,
Hmm.
because because otherwise you're defining authoritarianism versus anarchism, or
Right.
libertarianism, whatever you want to call it. And that's not really economic necessarily. That's just like a social. That's how you socially will develop a society, as opposed to like what kind of economic rules you may enforce in that society would be like.
Hmm.
That's where like socialism is like economically left, whereas like capitalism is economically right. Um, that's probably where and that's where I started applying that too. Is like, well, dang, it's pretty whack that there's a lot of surplus uh, money, like surplus capital that exists for my labor. At the time I was working at that assisted living facility I was talking about. I bust my butt near 40 hours a week, and I can't be considered full time because that's expensive. Admittedly, it
Right.
is expensive, but I don't see why I should be excluded because I'm working just like these other. Like, how am I? Like, if it wasn't for my parents having insurance, how would I be able to like go to the dentist every 6 months? How would I be able to go to the doctor and like,
Yeah.
you know, and it just couldn't happen if it wasn't for the fact that I had that privilege of having parents who had insurance in the first place, or health insurance.
Right.
Um, and that's like a whole rabbit hole. Some people would probably argue like, well, you could still have these systems in capitalism, and then I would assume the argument for that would be like, well, if that were the case, then why don't we just do that? And then of course, they don't want to actually concede providing health insurance or something, or maybe they do, but there's just no feasible way of implementing it without like complicated measures, and
Right.
that's a whole thing. But
So
that
when did firearms enter the mix?
Oh man. Same
Because
time
that's
frame, give or take. I worked at that place for like 2 or 3 years, so that took a decent chunk of my life so far. Um,
uh,
I was working there, and late at night, like we just kind of like chill out for like 30 minutes after work, and we just talk. And one of the guys there was I don't want to say ex-Marines because I know like they get uppity about it. Like, once you're a Marine, you're always a Marine, but it's like he didn't technically retire from the Marines. Like, he
yeah.
wasn't there for 20 years or 10 years, whatever. So he doesn't get the retirement from it. But
Right.
he's not currently an enlisted Marine.
He just got discharged. Whatever.
Yeah. So I guess it'd be like discharged Marine. I don't want to like offend anybody.
Just say
Just
ex-marine. It's fine.
ex Marine,
Nobody really cares.
ex Marine.
I'm ex-army, so it's fine.
And he did some crazy stuff too. Like, I didn't know this at the time when I was like 18 or whatever. But he was like, yeah, like in the 70s and 80s, I was down in South America running a tank division and doing sec ops, or spec ops
Mhm.
for the U.S., like doing XYZ. And it's like, and I'm just like listening to his stories, and he's like, yeah, we had to like do this and like clear this, and then once we had it all cleared, like none of this was on record, so we just had to get it done. So we lined everybody up and we were like interrogating them. I'm like, holy crap, this is getting dark real quick. But I ended up, he's like, hey, you want to go to the range and go shooting? I'm like, sure. Never done that before.
Mhm.
Knowing that this guy is probably lacking a therapist, um, and listening to his stories, I ended up going. The guy is still good. He's a good dude. Just don't mess with him, kind of thing. And I ended up
Right.
shooting his military uh what is it wasn't the M it was it the M16 back then, or was it the M4 back then?
In
whatever
the
the
70s, it was the M16.
M16. So he had that,
80s,
and of
yeah,
course it wasn't fully automatic because they
right,
first I don't know how he's able to do this, but he was able to keep it, and then they just didn't make it fully auto. But he was
right,
able to keep it, and I shot that, and that was like really fun. And then I shot like a
yeah.
different gun. I was like, oh, that was really fun. And then I shot his like custom. I think it was a custom 45. It was supposed to be like an M9 like replica kind of thing, but like a lot of add-ons and everything.
Mhm.
That was really fun, but I was like never shot a pistol before, and I was really shit at it.
Yeah.
But it was like I'm like, wow, this is fun. So I spent my Christmas bonus money on a very expensive custom-made AR-15 that I enjoy.
I didn't know you had an AR-15.
I do. It's
Yeah,
it's a long barrel because at the time again I was under the age of 21, and
right.
I didn't want anybody to question if I had a legal firearm for my age, because if the AR barrel is too short, it could be considered a pistol,
How long
and
is the barrel?
it's well. I think the gun length in total without the stock pulled back is like just short of 3 feet. Like that's the
Well,
whole gun.
16 inches is
So
is pretty standard.
I think I've I think I have a 16 or 18-inch barrel. I don't remember, but it's
Okay.
long. But the
Yeah.
point of it was like I didn't want anybody to question me, like I don't know if that is long enough, and then I get in trouble for that or whatever. I didn't want to even like have that be a thing. So I was just
Yeah.
like, just give me the biggest one you got. Yeah, give me whatever
Yeah.
the longest is. Um,
Yeah.
and then also the longer it is, the more accurate it is to an extent.
Right. Right.
So that kind of helped for a new shooter. Um, and then yeah, now every now and then I waste money on ammunition. So
Well,
I
some
mean
would see it as an investment, but potato, potato.
that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so I guess yeah, you go now. You go. Give
I
us your
didn't. I
hot
didn't mean to
takes.
like go into like interviewer mode, but that's okay.
Well, I mean, I feel like for the purpose of this, I suppose that would be like kind of enough because also I'm kind of like young, so I don't really have a lot
Yeah.
of backstory to really.
Well, you're 24. That's how old I was when I joined the military, and so we've got a little bit of distance there in years, which is fine. I don't know a lot of the, so I'll go into my background and who I
Yeah.
am and whatever, but I'll get to the point of how I've always been left leaning, but I don't really know that much about like even like socialism and how it's related to quote unquote communism or whatever, how you want to put it, which I know are really dirty words for some people.
Oh yeah, dude, those are actually like
Um,
bad words. We're gonna get super banned.
yeah, so I don't. I try to be careful with how I try to label myself because honestly, I research a lot of stuff. I kind of know who I am as a person and how I treat people and whatever. But as far as putting a label on all that, I don't really know how to do that. So that's kind of why I'm also interested in having this with you because I feel like you know more about that kind of thing, and I'm trying to get an education here. So
Oh man,
that's the whole
pressure.
point.
Ugh.
Exactly.
Pressure's on.
So my name is Greg. I am an OEF combat veteran. I served one tour of duty to Afghanistan in 2012, 2013. We were in Kandahar province, which, if anybody knows anything about Afghanistan, that's where it's not the capital, but it's still a pretty big. Kandahar, the city, is a pretty big city in Afghanistan, and we were very, very south in the province, and we were in the middle of nowhere. It was a good time. We made the best of it. I was in the military for 10 years. I was in a military police unit for 7 of those years, but I was not a military police person myself. I started off as an Army cook, and then I got a secondary MOS 24 Bravo, which is, or sorry, 20. 25 uniform, which is communications. From there, I transferred to the unit here in Florida, which was the 257 Transportation Battalion. That's where I ended my career in Gainesville, is where that's at. That's where I got. So I always kind of had an interest in guns, just from movies and video games and whatever. However, none of my family members were into guns. Like I said, I grew up in Metro Detroit, Michigan, which is a very, very diverse community. It has the largest Muslim population outside of the Middle East in a city called Dearborn.
Huh. I didn't know
That's where
that at
my
all. That's crazy.
Yep. If you walk around downtown Dearborn, it looks like you're in Iraq. It really does, because of all the signs on the buildings are all in Arabic, and you can look it up on YouTube. There's a lot of right wingers that were thinking that the city of Dearborn was running under Sharia law, which it is not. But
I just would have
people
never
are
guessed like Oh yeah, like Michigan is the that's where like if you're a Muslim, that's where you go is Michigan. Would have never
it,
thought that. I would have
yeah.
thought maybe like
Well, actually,
California or something.
it's actually not a big Muslim community. It's actually well, I guess there is that also, but there's a sect of the Middle Eastern population called Chaldean, and
Okay.
Chaldeans are Catholic people, people from Iraq that are Catholic.
Huh.
So it's the converts, so to speak, and that's Chaldeans are. I don't know if they're the majority of the population, but it's a very large percentage of the Middle Eastern people that live there are Chaldean, which are Middle Eastern
Huh.
Catholics.
We're like I don't know how long we're into this right now, but I've already learned some.
Well,
Oh, 32 minutes. We're 32 minutes in. I've already learned like five different things that I didn't even think that I didn't even know existed.
that's
That's
okay.
crazy. That's awesome.
We we can keep it going. So there's that there. My high school that I went to was probably 20% black, 30% Jewish, and then the rest just white Christian middle class people. So I had a lot of friends, and then so my high school was like that. But I lived on the border of a city called West Bloomfield, which is probably 80% Jewish, and then again a lot of Chaldeans. We had a lot of Indian people that went to my high school, a lot of Asians. So I literally grew up in what I would call a melting pot. A lot of
Yeah,
my
like
friends
a
were,
crazy melting pot. That's awesome.
yeah, it's really really diverse, and obviously at the time when you're growing up in that, you don't really realize what the rest of the world is like, or let's just say for our purposes, the rest of the country, the United States. I remember, for example, when I went to basic training, which was in Columbia, South Carolina. I'm a pretty social guy, and I can make friends, I rather quickly with a lot of different people, and so I would talk to some of these guys, and we had one gentleman that was from, I don't remember where, but somewhere in Georgia, and he literally had never met a black person, and he was 23, 24 years old. And he was the one that showed me how to really use a gun when I first got there. He was the one that, because we got our rifles. This is a story I always like to tell. Because before I joined the military, I hadn't really ever shot a gun. I think BB guns was the extent of it. Definitely never a real firearm. And so we get to basic training, and it's a high stress situation. It's not quite like it is in the movies, but
Mm-hmm.
they do yell at you, and it's sort of a psychological thing. So we're doing all of our stuff. We get our rifles, and we go up to our barracks, and I'm just we had a little bit of personal time every once in a while. And I'm just talking to the guys, and I said, so these rifles or whatever, like, when do we get the real ones? And that one guy I just mentioned, he, and just a caveat, he wasn't racist. He just never had met a black person before.
Mm-hmm.
He was actually like really into like Will Smith movies and like, sort of the West Coast rap culture and stuff. But he just lived in a town that didn't have any black people in it. So just kind of a weird thing.
It's a weird
But he just laughed at me.
juxtaposition in your life where it's like you're
Yeah.
literally living in like probably one of the most diverse situations I think I've ever heard a single human being live in, and then just like you meet this guy who's like, oh yeah, this is it. This is it.
Yeah.
I've never seen. Nope. No. I mean movies, yeah, but nope. This is it. Like
Yeah.
that's insane. That's
He was a
crazy.
really nice guy, kind of like, you'd expect somebody like that to not be open-minded or whatever. But so anyway, so I said, so these rifles, these are the fake ones, right? Like, when do we get the real deal? And he just laughed at me. He's like, dude, these are the real guns. Because to me, they look like movie props. Like they were like obviously like very well worn and used, not, it's just the training weapons, it's the stuff that we were going to be using for training.
Mm-hmm.
And like that night, he's like, dude, I was like, hey man, I've never shot a gun before. He's like, all right, let's sit down. I'm going to break this whole thing down for you, put it back together. I'm going to tell you about, as much as I can without going to the range, what to expect and all this kind of, he just took me to school and just told me all about it.
That's really cool. That's really cool.
It was really cool. And so, so that's kind of where like I said, I liked video games and movies and stuff, but I just never, like, the thought of owning a gun just was so foreign to me. And just like, it's all, it's like, why do you need one? Like, I feel pretty safe. Like, I'll just call the cops. Like, this was like, I kind of had the beginnings of being left leaning just because of my upbringing and the diversity that I was exposed to early in life. But then, owning a gun, I just never really thought about it or whatever. So that's where that came from. So I was in the Army for 10 years. Moved to Florida in 2013 or 14. I think it was 2014. And, lived in Orlando. We've lived in Orlando on and off since then. But so what happened is I was in my car. I was getting gas one particular evening. This was, I bought my first gun almost 2 years ago. Not quite. But what prompted it is, so I was in my car, I was getting gas at a gas station in Orlando. And it was, I think it's really funny, by the way, when people say that Orlando has a ghetto, because it really doesn't. It's just kind of a few different areas that are lower income. And I mean, go to fucking, East Side Detroit, at midnight on any particular evening, and you'll experience real fear. Let's just say that this was a lower income part of town. That's what I'll call it, because it's not the ghetto. It's just not. But anyway, so I was in this, neighborhood, and, there was like, I just happened to look over to my right. It was one of those bigger gas stations. And I happened to look over to my right, and I saw like a group of like 8, 9, 10 people. They weren't all black people. There was, I think, a couple Hispanic people as well. But they were all just gathered. And, I try to just give everybody the benefit of the doubt. And I got out of my car, and I started pumping gas. And all of a sudden, another car pulls in, loud music, and my instinct was that this looks like something, like a fight is going to happen, or just knowing how the world works. And that was, and then all of a sudden, one gentleman started walking over to my area. There was me and another car, uh, and pumping gas, and just kind of started walking towards us, but not towards me or the other person. And nothing happened, but in that moment, I just felt. Uh, I just said to myself, "This does not feel right. I felt vulnerable, and I felt unsafe." And truly, it had nothing to do with skin color, or anything like that. It just it looked like there was going to be a fight. I just had a sense of fear in my mind, and you know, I just felt, like I said, I felt unsafe. So
Was that after you discharged from the military at that time, or is that like you had just were you
yeah, no, I had never owned a firearm when I was in the military. I got out in January of 18 is when I got out, and I think this was towards the end of that year. This was like September or October of 18.
do you think any of your experiences, or like, because you said you were in the military for 10 years, do you think any of your military experience kind of like uh, maybe contributed to that to some extent? Because like I mean, I have no idea, but I would imagine like, you've probably been in incredibly dangerous situations is my guess. Do you think any of that contributed to just you kind of like just feeling like,
Feeling unsafe, or just
yeah, feeling
feeling
like,
like I wanted a gun.
well, I mean, both, a little
Both.
bit of both.
Yeah.
um
So yes and no. I mean, I learned. I definitely, the military taught me everything I needed to know about marksmanship, and training and living in a war zone for a year, um, definitely prepared me for. It's a combat zone, so I definitely know. I feel comfortable I feel comfortable with my training in getting myself out of any kind of situation that would require armed self-defense. Like, that's what the military is. So it's kind of hard to translate that to the United States, because you can't just walk around with a gun on
yeah.
and 240 rounds of ammunition, which is what I would do walking in downtown Kandahar. um, it's a different situation. But as far as what I bought a firearm initially, or I'm not going to go into like how I convinced my wife. I mean, maybe I will at another episode, because my wife initially was very anti-gun, but not for the reasons that you might think. Uh, I'll go into that in another episode. But I introduced the idea of buying a gun to her, and I told her that I was scared, and or not scared, just that I felt unsafe, and that I felt like I could not defend myself, especially in a situation against that many people, which it felt like it could have turned into something bad. I literally I took the gas thing out of my car, and I kind of just got out of there, because it had that, like, that energy to it. Like, I don't know if you've ever been in a fight or seen a fight happen or anything like that, but if you have, that there's the energy of the room changes, of where you're at, and you just kind of get that gut feeling that, okay, it looks like something's about to go down, and it's that fight or flight reflex. And so that's when I told my wife. I said, we live in Florida. I mean, I found out later that buying a gun in Michigan is actually pretty easy too. But um, I was like, I feel like I want to buy a gun and get into shooting and training more. And I hadn't done it in a few years since I left the military. I hadn't. It's a long story of how I left, but I hadn't been to the range in probably 3 years, even still being in the military. And so I was like, I really miss shooting, and I want to get back into it. I want to have something for self defense, and so that's where that happened for me. Uh, and I guess that brings it up to where we're at now. I've had a gun. I've owned guns now for 2 years, and I plan on, before the end of the year, being certified for CCW instructor. That's my goal.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
I don't know if I babbled too much.
No, I mean it's fine. It's your
Yeah,
life, you know.
I had my little notes over here that I was trying to hit everything. So
I don't even have notes. I had no idea where to start. Because it's
that's
just
okay.
like, because I don't know, like things don't always just kind of happen linearly. I know we live life and we experience time linearly, but um, you kind of like have to. It's not like everything always happens all at once. Kind of like what I was saying. Like I didn't just become like a socialist. Like I didn't just like wake up one day and was like, you know what, I'm a socialist. And the same thing with like when I had lost my faith in religion is like, you know what, I'm an atheist. Like it didn't just happen like that.
Well, no,
It was over the
nothing
course of
like that just
time.
happens.
So I just had
Yeah.
no idea like where to start because it's like there's like so much that had contributed to, like I don't know how many hundreds of hours of like debate or like philosophy or I don't know, just like extracurricular like science stuff that I've just kind of like absorbed that
Yeah.
has gotten me to this point. I really like biology. I really like biology a lot. I think it's really cool. I don't think I could ever be a biologist just because um, there's just so much that I don't care about in biology that I know I'd have to learn.
Hmm.
So I just like I could never see myself becoming that. So I just kind of like try to learn whatever I do enjoy to the best of my ability, and then just like kind of work on that or work from that angle.
That's just called the journey of life, my friend.
Yeah.
You know, you just kind of find what you're into and what makes you excited, what makes you happy, what makes you passionate, and that's that's how you find your niche or whatever.
Oh, I had a question for you.
Yeah.
You said that you had served as you weren't like you were an MP, but you weren't like an MP person or something like that.
Yeah. So in the military, there is so we're there's platoons, there's companies, there's brigades, there's battalions, and they're all different. Company level is the lowest level, and it's about 150 guys, girls, whatever, people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we had a lot of. We didn't have all men because women are obviously allowed to be police officers, but women are not allowed to be infantry. Well, I think that's actually changed recently, but for a long time they didn't allow women. But that's another thing. Um, so we were a company. We were an MP company, which means the bulk of the people in the company were military police. But then, of course, you have your support staff. So at the time, I was a cook.
Mm-hmm.
We had me and like 5 or 6 other guys, one female, that were cooks. There was communications. There's motor pool, transportation, running the trucks, um, administration. Quote unquote secretaries, 42 alphas. So the unit that I was in, thanks, babe. She beard me a beer.
Round two.
Round two. Um, and so what that meant is I was just supportive of the MP unit. There's all kinds of units. There's aviation units. There's infantry, airborne. Most of the different like main things are um, uh, combat based. But of course, the one I was in here was a transportation battalion, which means we were a little bit higher level, and then we would control a lot of, you know, just like just like Walmart has their semi trucks and whatever, like the military has their big vehicles and stuff. So of logistics, so it runs just like anything else, and you have to have all your support staff. So I was in an MP unit, which meant technically I wasn't an MP, but I got all of the MP training. So anytime we would have so when you join, so this was also Army Reserves, so part-time military, but they say 2 weeks of the year. Really, it was more like 3 to 4 weeks out of the year. You would have a big block of training that you would like. We went to California. We would go to Wisconsin. We went to New Mexico a couple times, Texas area, uh, for just to kind of keep your skills up and all that kind of stuff. But that was always the most fun because that was where we did all like we would go. It was literally like simulated villages, like Middle East. Well, because we were in the Middle East for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
still are, which is dumb. But like you would walk into this training area and it looks like you're in, Fallujah or whatever, which was really cool because we would have our M4s full real firearms, but they would have these magazines filled with either blanks or paintballs, and it was basically just a big game of paintball, but really realistic training and all that kind of stuff. So that's where I got all of my combat training was with. I trained with the military police. So actually when I was in Afghanistan, I had to go out on missions with the police, with the military police. If a guy fell out or somebody in the rotation just whatever for whatever reason, hey Greg, grab your shit, going out in an hour. Okay, you had to put on full uh, bulletproof vest, helmet, all that kind of stuff. Um, so that's where I got all my training.
Nice.
Did that answer it all?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess so. I suppose like a follow-up question would be like, because you said that you were stationed domestically as well. Is that correct? Or did I
Yeah. So the
mishear?
reserves, it's one you go a weekend every month is a drill weekend for it's 2 days. It's just a Saturday Sunday, and then like I said, you do like sometimes three. I've been gone for a month before for the annual. They call it annual training. Our unit in Michigan was in a city called Jackson, which is just outside of another city called Ann Arbor, which is where the University of Michigan is. For those of you who know about Michigan, it's basically the equivalent of Gainesville, which is UF. Um, and so that's where like it's just like a regular. There's actually right down the street from me. There's a National Guard building, and we see soldiers go there once a week or whatever, or sorry, once a month. Um, and that's what it is. It's a once a month obligation, and then obviously you can be called to active duty and deploy, which is what we did.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
So
and you
I
get
would say that's
benefits. I got a signing bonus, and you get paid. Whatever.
now is like a
Not
10-year
not.
mark like an official retirement mark, or like would that
Mm-mm.
be? No, that's later.
No, 2020 is retirement.
Oh
I
my gosh, that seems like it's such a long way.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into why I left. It's a long story. But I am grateful for the training that I got, and I made the best of it. So
Well, it's a
I
fairly
thought,
unique experience. I know a lot of people like join the military, but it's still, even still, only a very small fraction of like our population specifically when it is volunteer only currently.
yeah,
Um, and not a lot of people really experience like military life, and even fewer people actually experience being deployed in a different country.
mhm,
That's like currently, although we're not at war like right now, that but it is like a combat zone. Even fewer
right,
people end up in one of those. So that's a fairly unique experience.
yeah, it was. It was definitely that was the most I would call cinematic experience was the process of flying from Detroit. We flew to Fort Bliss, which is in Texas, El Paso. We did our little 2-3 weeks of training there, like just kind of getting you ready for going over. Flying from there to there's a country called Kyrgyzstan, which is a couple countries over from Afghanistan, and that's the staging area. But that's the staging area for everybody. Like Australia was there, England, uh, pretty much all of Europe. had troops there, had soldiers there. I met people from Africa. I met people from all over Asia. Just everybody was just. This was just the big giant staging area for everybody flying in and out of Afghanistan. And you stay there. And we were there for like 2 weeks. It's right along this like crazy big mountain. I think it. I think it's actually connected to the Himalayan mountains, which is where Mount Everest is. Um, just gorgeous, just a beautiful country. It used to be part of the USSR. Now they're independent, but it's still like super like Eastern European. Like everything there was written in like whatever the hell language it was. They have their own language, the Kyrgyzstan people, but super friendly local folks. Really good food. We were allowed to drink there, which was nice. So I got to try all these crazy different beers from all over that part of the world. Um, so from there, you go to uh, Kandahar Airfield, which is where we were, or where we were based out of. And people always ask me what it was, especially when I got back, like, what's it like in Afghanistan? And truly, there is nothing in the United States that you can compare to the country of Afghanistan. It's everybody there, everybody in the entire country has the same religion,
Mm-hmm.
which I know isn't surprising, but really take that thought into your mind. You literally walk around and you don't see, black people and Asian people and brown people and whatever, and you don't see T-shirts with different uh, stuff written on it. You don't see women in dresses. You don't see, you know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm also an atheist, so I don't believe in religion. I don't think it should govern your thinking at all. But it's literally like stepping back in time. Like you think about the Bible stories that you heard about growing up and watching some of those obscure 90s cartoons about Bible stories and stuff. And that's what it looks like. It's people that are in full, you know, uh, their attire, whatever. I don't know what it's called, but, but it's also a third world country. So it's just dirt roads everywhere. They don't have a building code. They don't have an electric grid. Um, it's super primal and it's super like, it's like being back in time. That's all I can describe it as. And it's farming culture. Everybody
Mm-hmm.
there's pretty much either if they live in a little village, most of that village is going to be farming, agriculture. Our little compound that we lived on was between a brick factory and a school, and like down the road was like a big giant farming community. So it's just kind of it's really out there. It's really, I mean, it's their way of living, and they don't know anything else. But compared to Western society, there's nothing like it.
That's interesting.
Yeah, but also at the same time, some of the friendliest and most humble people I've ever met. You know what I mean? Like the people that we dealt with on a daily basis are interpreters, and the people that we were allowed to trade with. They would allow people onto our compound to like sell, cigarettes and gum and DVDs or whatever you wanted to buy. We had a guy come in and do haircuts every week, and that guy, me and him, pretty much became friends because a lot of the guys were coming and going. I would basically stay put, uh, doing my cook stuff, um, and then and so he would show up, and me and him would just hang out. And he knew it, he spoke English and everything. Um, he kept on wanting to buy, like I had an iPhone, and like he kept on wanting to buy it from me, like every time because they don't sell iPhones there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's just one of those. It's a wild country. But again, at the same time, I'd go back in a heartbeat. I'd go there on vacation, no problem.
That's interesting. That's really cool because that's like a story you don't really hear
Yeah,
about like Afghanistan, and probably more so because of its recent history with the United States and such. And and
Right.
the U.S. Imperialistic hand reaching and
Exactly.
clawing its way through the country and stuff. But
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that Russia was there for the entire 80s.
oh yeah, it was.
Russia invaded in 1980 and they stayed for 10
That's
years.
something that maybe we can talk about in a different episode too, because that's like one of the big points in the Cold War was towards the end of it was
Hmm.
and what ended up becoming Al Qaeda
Right.
later was born out of what the U.S. had done during that same time period, and also had led to ISIS too, because at the end of the day, there's a little bit of intertwining between the
Right.
two groups and such. But that's really complicated. Like most
There's a
current
lot going on
politics
there.
and
Yeah.
especially Middle
It's a
Eastern
deep,
politics, is just like
it's a deep
insane.
dive.
Um,
Yeah.
and it's another thing to kind of think of, like Afghanistan is kind of surrounded by, like, I wouldn't say like incredibly developed countries, but like India is not that too far away from it. Also, Pakistan is
Right.
fairly well developed too. And some parts of Saudi Arabia I've also heard is like very well developed too, just because of
Right.
their like oil wealth and stuff like that. And just
Oh
kind
yeah.
of hear like,
Every other Middle Eastern nation has money for
yeah,
sure.
and it's like to
Yeah.
hear I never would have thought that Afghanistan was just kind of like in like basically what we would probably call like backwoods, or like um, I don't really know how, like, just the heavy agriculture, pre-industrial revolution kind of lifestyle, I suppose.
Yeah.
And especially like India is a nuclear nation. Like they have
Right.
nuclear missiles. Israel is is rumored to have nuclear missiles. They're a very well developed nation.
Yeah.
I know Pakistan is looking. They were trying to get that the whole like Pakistan deal, or the Iran deal, specifically was because Iran wanted to have like nuclear energy. They wanted to become less dependent on like oil and stuff like that. But the big
Right.
stipulation was to like, oh yeah, you can't just like make nuclear bombs because you and Israel don't get along, and just
Right.
like, although it's not confirmed, they probably have nuclear missiles. We don't need that
Right.
happening. Um,
Right.
that was kind of like one of the big deals for that. And Pakistan is also like a really well. I don't know. It's just uh, you just don't. I guess you don't think about it. Like it's almost like saying like it's almost like hearing like Tennessee is like still pre-industrial revolution, but the rest of the
Right.
United States is like, oh yeah, we do nuclear physics. We've sent people into space. Like
Yeah.
we have trains that aren't just running off of coal either, mind you. They're running off of
Right.
like diesel. We got airplanes, like, and then Tennessee is like sitting there with like a wood and like metal shovel, like
Isn't
manually.
it also West Virginia?
I I didn't want to like meme on them too hard, but like West Virginia is pretty like not great either. But I was like thinking Tennessee because I'm like they're kind of like in the middle. They're like pretty close to the middle of the country, a little middle of
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
east of the country, surrounded
They're in
by
the Middle
states.
East.
Like center, and then just like
Yeah.
a little off center, off right.
Right.
They're off right.
Yes.
That's why I kind of picked them. But the same thing with like West Virginia. It's like almost like saying that, like, oh yeah, they're like, but everybody else around them.
Right.
It's just kind of crazy to think about, I suppose.
It
Um,
is.
and then there also have been another thing that is what you had mentioned with Russia having been in there during the USSR, like that there was nothing really, no technology was really gained through that relationship, aside
Right.
from like weaponry, I guess you could say, because I guess
Oh no, they
you
didn't
can.
gain anything from Russia.
So it's like dang, it sounds like they just need a bone. Um, they just need.
It's a while. It's a they. So when I was there, they've been a fighting nation. Basically, people have been trying to conquer that nation for thousands of years or whatever it's been, and it's almost like just they haven't been able to find their footing in that way because so many people have been trying to take them over.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just kind of the way it's been there for a long time. And yeah, like you said, like nobody's throwing them a bone. They're just trying to be conquered, and they just happen to be in a part of the world that just is surrounded by richer nations that are just like, oh, this is just another tract of land that we can try to conquer or whatever.
Basically, like the it's basically British, like UK, like, oh yeah,
Yeah,
this map
that's who, and that's
circle, that's mine.
that's who drew the line. Like that's so. It's really weird you say that because the the time zones that are there, it's off by it's like something 30. It's like let me see.
I know what you're talking about, where it's not like an
It's
o'clock
not an
time
hour.
zone. It's
Yeah, but whatever the Greenwich Mean Time is, what is this? Kandahar.
there's a few countries that are like that. I do you think it's because of the mountains being there? It kind of like gives a
No, it's because of the way the British drew the lines, like
really
the border lines. Yeah.
dang.
So right now it's 6:49 p.m. here, but it's 3:19 a.m. in Kandahar. So it's
Okay,
not. It's 30 minutes off or whatever,
that's
in whatever
interesting.
hours. Yeah. It fucked with everything for a whole year. It just when I was trying to call my family or whatever, it was not easy doing that. Trying to keep track of all that.
That's interesting. I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
What how are we doing on time?
We are looking at an hour 6 minutes now. We've been
Okay.
recording.
Well,
So
I want to just say, if you want to just cut it off there, we'll just kind of recap. So I'm Greg. That's Gabe. This is the Sunny Reformer. Excuse me, Sunshine Reformer podcast. Um, and this is a left leaning podcast that has to do with firearms ownership, specifically with regard to the left or leftist community, and that's what we're going to try to stick to and not
yeah,
jump around too much.
maybe like once
Um,
in a while, just kind of like go on a, have a little fun. But
exactly. So we hope that you've enjoyed our little banter session, our introduction. Stay tuned for the next episode, which is going to be a little bit more traditional in how the show is going to be laid out. But this was just our fun little first episode. Get to know who we are as people, and I think we've accomplished that.
yeah, I think we.
What do you think?
I would say so. Like just a kind of like brief. Here we are. This is what we are. Kind of thing. I
Yep.
think we did
And this
that.
is what we're gonna. This is kind of our mission statement is to. I actually wrote that down. Where was it?
What you don't see is that his whole back wall is just like 1,000 post-it notes of like varying colors and like
Like
multiple
Charlie
different
Day.
colorations of like Sharpie highlighter and pen and
Exactly.
pencil and all that, and he's just got like
Um,
thousands of little notes.
close, but in iPad form. Uh, so this is just what I wrote earlier today. It's a leftist podcast. We will be talking about firearms ownership on the left, from buying firearms to training, and the subsequent political topics relating to that and other relevant topics. So it's obviously owning guns is an American right by way of the Second Amendment.
Hmm.
But I feel like in some ways, and I think a lot of other people that I know and friends with think that it has sort of been hijacked, so to speak, by the right side of the spectrum, conservative people, that kind of thing. And me and you and many other people believe that that's just not the case. And so that's my goal, at least, is to educate and inform um, the left leaning people or leftist community um, into why I believe in armed self defense and why I think you should consider it in the political times that we live in currently. So
Do it.
that's just what I think it's
I
what I
think
want
I
to
think
do.
a nice little ending card too would be like, um, join a leftist group, like a local leftist group, not just do like online politics, like actually go out in your community and like, join the SRA or like, whatever equivalent thing.
Yeah, there's a couple of them out there.
We need to grow the community, and I think we'll be
Right.
looking for some more too to kind of like recommend. But find people like in real life, because
Yeah.
if anything, it's a community of people. Harken back to like the township idea, where like everybody in a town knows each other. We as people are social creatures. We are merely animals. We are no different, in that respect, and we have we have like primal needs. One of these, us being social, is to like know people, talk to people, interact with people. So try to do that. Don't just don't just be behind a phone, or don't just be behind your computer or what have you, um, and just talk like on Reddit or something. Like actually go out and like meet people, and go do
Yeah.
things. So
Absolutely.
do that. It doesn't have to be the SRA. Like my sister doesn't like to do the gun thing, but she has her own personal reasons for it, and I'm like, well, I mean, something, or even just join the SRA just to like have like-minded people around you. That doesn't
But it
hurt
is
either.
important to say that we are not an official
Oh yeah,
entity of the
we
SRA.
are not an arm of the SRA. We
We
just
we speak for ourselves, and we're not affiliated with the SRA in any way.
yeah.
We got to
So I
put that out
think
there for legal reasons.
so.
So
That's it. That's it. Thanks for
you want to
the
call it there?
Yeah, thanks for watching our first pilot podcast introductory Wombo combo.
Yes, and stay tuned for the next one. It's going to be a banger. All right, bye.